Well, Rob, this is a question I've had a lot of time to think about, and the more I think about it, it's partly mystery because why people get attached to different places, different over the years, over the centuries. It is a profound question. Other people do it in other cultures, but we in particular do it, and even in traveling to foreign countries who have had longer histories than ours. They even find it curious when they visit America that we're so we take such care of our historic places. You can walk in places in Europe where monumental battles have been fought. And there's not even a plaque. There's no monument or open space left where such and such thing occurred. We do have this particular fondness for landmarks in our history, and perhaps in our few 100-year long history, going back to the colonial era, the one event that where there are perhaps more monuments and more dedicated areas than any other in our history are those around the American Civil War. Why is that? I think a few reasons. It was a fratricidal war. There was no them and us. There was just us and us. I think that's one of the reasons, because it so profoundly tore the fabric of American society. There was so much destruction, so much loss of life, that catastrophe lingered for generations. If you look at American culture and art and music, you can see a change that occurs in the 1890s. It took an entire generation to grow up, live, and die before the national mood seems to have changed. Certainly individual lives may have rebounded quicker than that, but in terms of the national culture, the national family, it was an entire generation. So it's hard to overestimate the damage, the catastrophic nature of that war that it had on the generation that lived through it. More recently, scholars are revising upwards the number of war casualties, the number of dead, the number of wounded, the number of civilians who were killed, maimed, dispossessed. It was such a magnitude of tragedy that we don't really get our arms around it. And so I think of all the conflicts and of all the events in American history, the highs and the lows, the Civil War stands out still, even with the advance of time, even with the greater distance we get from it. Look, I've been working on my Civil War movies for more than 20 years, more than 25 years actually. So a big chunk of my life has been involved in researching these stories, telling these stories. And when I look around, I see a greater interest now than even when I started in the early late 1970s. So I think it's because of the initial catastrophic nature of the war, the fact that it was us and us, the fact also that it was fought in our own backyards. It wasn't fought in some faraway country, some faraway place, where only the soldiers went and some returned and some didn't. This was fought here. I live in Rappahannock County, Virginia. You look in any direction, you'll find a crossroads where this army moved north or this army moved south. Not far in adjoining counties, major battles of the Civil War were fought. There's a couple of houses right down the street from where I live that were used as hospitals by both armies moving south, moving north. Mosby's Raiders moved through here. So there's almost nowhere you can go which wasn't touched by the war. Also, I think the reasons why the war was fought still resonate. The issue of race is still very much in our consciousness as a people. We're still trying to work this out. still trying to strive to that perfection that Martin Luther King articulated, being able to look at one another, regardless of our racial and ethnic background, to be able to look at one another and see the content of our character and look beyond the superficie of what we see when we meet people, to find our common humanity. It's a different place here, certainly, than it was in the 1860s or even the 1960s when I grew up. But that striving for perfection, that's a road we're on, and so Americans are kind of acutely aware of this and sensitive to these issues. And that's something that the Civil War, the cauldron of the Civil War, encompasses in the issue of slavery and the abolition of slavery, the Emancipation Proclamation. Another thing that was another issue of the war was, where does sovereignty lie? Does the principal sovereignty lie in the individual? Does it lie in the community? Does it lie within a state? Does it lie in the national governance? These were issues that were argued by the founding generation. If you read all the arguments that were conducted in the Constitutional Convention, should we have a unitary presidency? Should there be 3 people making up the presidency? The founding generation was concerned about the devolution of power. They didn't want to see a king. We fought a revolution to get rid of king and hereditary aristocracy. They were looking for a more democratic way to share power. They feared concentrated power. So these were embodied in the Constitution, the protections against concentrated power, the checks and balances. There were also the further protections in the Bill of Rights. And so when you had these various issues moving through the 1840s, 1850s, could they have been resolved amicably, peaceably? Probably yes. I mean, all history has crossroads and diverging points when you could have taken this path or taken that path. And the circumstances and the players in the 1840s, 1850s, and 1860s led to war. I don't think it was inevitable, but it led to war. And the consequences were dire. But so one of the issues that is articulated, certainly in The War Starts, was the issue of, where does power lie? And those who made up the Confederate states that seceded would have argued in what we now call, and they call too, states' rights, that the political power was within the state governments, and that the state governments voluntarily came together to form a union, and that they could voluntarily leave. This was the argument for secession. And then the Unionists believed that, more or less, that the ultimate power resided in a federal government, and that states could no longer voluntarily leave. That was I'm oversimplifying, but it's the original conflict that was, and the spark was Fort Sumter. And those issues are still with us. We still argue every day about whether we resolve a certain issue at the federal level or whether it should be left to the states, or even whether it should be left within the state to the communities. And we're constantly having these arguments about zoning, about private property, about roads, about who pays for things. Every single issue goes back to the same issues that were fought over the Civil War. So I think for all these reasons, for historic reasons, for political reasons, for cultural reasons, the Civil War seems to be the cauldron where all these issues are concentrated. And then finally, from a filmmaker's point of view and from a storyteller's point of view, when you look at the Civil War, you find these incredible characters, these incredible people, whether they were wearing blue, whether they were wearing gray, whether they were civilians, whether they were black, whether they were white. They're human, but at the same time, they're almost larger than life. And so many of these people on their own become worthy subjects for novels, history, and for movies. So I have no doubt that that for many generations to come, as long as there's an America, filmmakers will be making movies about the American Civil War. Well, I respond to a good story intuitively, and so I wasn't back in the 1970s. I wasn't at all looking to do a movie on the Civil War. That wasn't where I was at. I just responding to various input and various stimuli. Like any filmmaker, ooh, I want to tell this story, I want to tell that story, I want to visit this place, I want to explore this world, I want to live in this place. And my former wife, wife number two, Victoria, thought I might like to read this book called The Killer Angels. I think I read it in 77, and somewhere around there. And I knew before I was halfway through the book that it was just a great read, great characters, great story, and it just excited me as a filmmaker. And by the time I finished it, I got in touch with my agent and started to acquire the rights. That was 78. So in 78, I acquired the rights to the book and met Michael Shara and started the long journey that took 15 years from the time I read it till the time it became a motion picture. Michael traveled through Gettysburg when his kids were young, and that visit made an impression on him. And that visit is what prompted him to then research the battle and write that novel. There's really nothing like it in the rest of his artistic output. But it was, when it came out, even though it won a Pulitzer Prize for fiction, it didn't sell that well, and he found it the response to it, even though it did win awards, it was not commercially what he'd expected. So it was a disappointment for him in that sense. The timing maybe didn't work for him because when it came out in the mid-70s, the country was fresh out of the Vietnam War, and people just had enough of war. I think it's like anything else with timing of a movie or a book, timing. But it was recognized for its literary merit. And then during his lifetime, he never got additional kind of credit for I think the quality of the writer that he is. He died in '88, so he didn't even live to see this Killer Angels turn into the motion picture Gettysburg. We developed a very close friendship over the years. He loved to sit around the piano and sing, as I do. And we would just open up the scores and get a good sight reader and go through, you name it, opera, operetta, musical comedy. But he had had a terrible automobile accident sometime in the years start to blur, but before I had met him, and that impaired his ability to write. So he, after that accident, creative writing for him became much more difficult than it was before. And he found it deeply frustrating because he had so many more stories he wanted to tell. And he left us in '88, so he never got to see the movie, and that was at that point one wondered whether it would ever be made. But he was a wonderful friend, and we had many great evenings around the piano. Both Gettysburg and Gods and Generals have a very strong life in home video and in all the aftermarkets, broadcast television. They have found an audience that continues to renew itself, and witnessed by a year and a half, 2 years ago, Warner Brothers released the director's cuts of both movies. There actually was a longer version than the Gettysburg movie. It was almost 18 minutes longer, which even I had forgotten. So when they said, we have a longer version we want to release as a director's cut, I said, there is no longer version. And then I was corrected when they showed me that, in fact, there was one that I'd forgotten about. And that was refinished almost 2 years ago remixed and recolored released along with Gods and Generals. In the case of Gods and Generals, there was in fact an hour more of material we added, re-edited the whole film and restored that to its original. And those films just play and play in the home video market. So it's been very gratifying that the audience keeps discovering and rediscovers those movies. It's a question I should have a ready, easy answer to, and I really don't, because it's a kind of a mystery why any of us choose this story or that story to tell as filmmakers when we're confronted with this whole kaleidoscope of stories that seem so compelling to us. Certainly, one of the reasons is when you start making motion pictures is very challenging. Getting them financed is very challenging. And so it's, in a sense, although it's never easy, I can't even use the word easy, it's not applicable, but it's easier to get a film financed if you've done similar films before. The financiers, the people who invest in movies, it's a lot of money, it's millions of dollars, can see that you have a track record. So if you look at any filmmakers making feature films, they are kind of working in an area, more or less. I'm endlessly admiring of somebody like Ang Lee, who he's not confined by genre. He just is so Catholic in his tastes in the films that he's able to do. And I, like most filmmakers, want to do all sorts of movies. I have interests that range across a wide range of topic and interests. But when it comes to getting them financed, people like to are comfortable if you stay in an area where they think you've been successful. And so even though I have projects, Joan of Arc project I've been working on for more than 20 years, a project on the French Revolution, all sorts of other projects I haven't developed, have screenplays that I've been very close to getting financed at various points over the last 20 plus years. The ones that get made are the Civil War movies because of Gettysburg and then Gods and Generals. So I'm very happy that that any of these get made, because it's tough to make a historical motion picture about any time, any period, for any filmmaker. And the Copperhead was of great interest to me because for me it was going into an entirely new area. If both Gettysburg and Gods and Generals explored why good people fight, Copperhead explores why good people choose not to fight, which is another compelling question. Because Copperhead is about a man who doesn't think it's a good idea to have a fratricidal war over these issues. He believes that these issues that the war is fought over can be solved non-violently. And for that reason, for his position, he is metaphorically tarred and feathered and ostracized from his community, which is a northern community. The story takes place in upstate New York in 1862. So this is very intriguing for me to look at the war through the lens of somebody who was not for it. You could find probably a story that takes place in the South, a person who was living in one of the southern states who was not in favor of secession, who was not in favor of a violent conflict over these issues, and that would be equally interesting to explore. So when I came across this story, I found it very intriguing because it was new ground for me to explore and to look at the war through an entirely different lens. And the character of Abner Beach, who is the principal character in Copperhead, is not a pacifist in the sense of a Quaker or a Mennonite being opposed to any war, any time, any place. He chooses to take a political position that this particular war is wrong to fight. And for this position, he is ostracized by his community, which is completely invested in the northern aims of the war, which by 1862 were certainly to preserve the Union, but in the fall of 1862 becomes the Emancipation Proclamation is issued, and it becomes also to free the slaves and abolish slavery. He is not in favor of slavery. He is in favor of preserving the Union. So he's not opposed to the war aims. He just doesn't think it's worth having a war over, that there are pacific means of solving these problems. So he's an intriguing character that Harold Frederic wrote when he wrote this novel in the late 1890s. Harold Frederic was a young man during the war, so he writes about things that he might have witnessed. It's a work of fiction, but it rings very true to time and place. And for me, it was breaking new ground. It was looking at the issues in an entirely new light, and it explores the issue of dissent and the cost of dissent, especially during war when everybody's at a fever pitch. The politics are extreme. People are very opinionated, and the stakes are literally life and death.